Darkside Phil is a terrible middle-aged Let's Player with self-entitlement issues and a massively inflated ego. He is a lolcow with a large cult following who watch only to see him and his business deteriorate. Who is Darkside Phil? Darkside Phil, DSP, the King of Hate, Philip Burnell is a former fighting game player who began Let's Playing in 2010 before it boomed. After he had gotten fired from his day job working at a helicopter company, DSP decided to turn this hobby into a full-time job. Although his gameplay is horrible, there's more to Let's Playing than just the gameplay. And even in all of those other areas, he fails spectacularly: editing, public relations, commentary, you name it. What truly makes him a lolcow, however, are his ego and his delusion. He truly believes that he is the inventor of Let's Playing and is above constructive criticism. Phil actually believes that his video game playthroughs are works of art. Offering any sort of constructive criticism whatsoever will cause Phil to accuse you of being a hater and/or troll, a detractor, as he calls it, and block you. Try to offer constructive criticism on his own forums? He will immediately lock the thread. As far as Phil is concerned, his word is the only correct one and everyone else's is wrong. Phil always makes promises to change, #DS positive. But attempts to deliver on those promises are always undone by his refusal to change. Phil expects PewDiePie level views for absolutely no effort whatsoever. He has called out numerous reviewers and critics for chastising mediocre games that he himself liked, such as Duke Nukem Forever, Resident Evil 6, and Murdered, Soul Suspect. Phil calls himself the King of Hate because he uses the hate he gets to fuel himself. In truth, Phil has thin skin and cannot realize that his own personality is why he receives the hate does. Subsection: Phil's ego stemming from fighting games. Another aspect of his inflated ego was his former career as a tournament fighting game player. Of course, Phil wasn't actually all that great as at the time. Evolution Fighting Game Tournament, EVO, was beginning the transition from arcade cabinets to console ports. The ports of Super Street Fighter II Turbo were not arcade perfect, and Phil was the only one in America who was familiar with the minor changes, making the fighters he used stronger, while his opponents unknowingly used weaker fighters or fighters that were countered by Phil's preferred character. To put it bluntly, the only reason Phil was the best Super Turbo player in America, as he proudly flaunts, was because the tournament happened to be rigged in his favor. The next year, Evo tried to learn from their mistake by using a different version. This one allowed you to pick any Street Fighter II version of any character. Phil had found an infinite block combo with M. Bison and abused it to holy hell and back. Typically, infinite combos are extremely hard to set up and maintain. This one was so easy that you could pick up a homeless bum off the street who had never played the game before, explain it to him, and after about 30 seconds of practicing it, he too would be able to win tournaments. Obviously, Phil got his ass handed to him once someone used it on him in a mirror match. The combo was with Champion Edition M. Bison: light scissor kick, greater than charge / crouching weak kick, greater than crouching weak kick, greater than repeat. End subsection. Phil himself is completely unable to accept reality. When the times change, Phil refuses to adapt. In the rare instance he does try to improve, it's the wrong areas. Phil truly believes that detractors are jealous of his success, when in reality no sane person would ever want the lifestyle Phil currently has. This was a man who would, for years, try to justify pointing a camera directly at his TV, and would diss anyone else for being someone who wears headphones and records their games on a computer monitor. Despite all the consequences that come from his actions, he truly believes none of it is his fault. To Phil, it's not his fault that people don't like that when he chooses to include his girlfriend in his videos. People hate it, it's the viewer's fault for not tolerating her. It's not his fault that his personality and attitude has caused thousands of videos criticizing Phil to appear over the years. Everyone else is just mentally ill. It's not his fault that he's been banned for excessive racism from Blip.tv, it's a detractor's fault for being jealous and reporting him. Those are just examples of how Phil is completely incapable of accepting fault. Going in hand with his delusion is Phil's irresponsibility with money. He honestly believes that putting himself $1.5 million in debt to move across the country with his girlfriend to Washington, and buying 2 new BMWs, was a good idea. Once he moves to Washington, Phil claimed, he will be able to have his much-needed back surgery, he'd have a much better attitude, meet fans at conventions, and put more effort into his videos. Everything would change and fans will watch him again and it will be happily ever after. That would soon prove to be a part of his delusional fantasies. When he was unable to run Battlefield Hardline, his solution was to throw down $3,000 on a pre-built that could have been assembled himself with the exact parts for $1,000 less. In reality, his motivation was to hide his faults as a Let's Player by streaming at an ultra-high quality. Once it was apparent that his PC could not handle streaming even the last generation games on max settings at 1080p and 60 FPS, he abandoned the idea and left his PC running 24 hours a day, frying his graphics cards and the internals of his desktop tower to never to play PC games again. Instead of doing the sensible thing with his Let's Player money, such as buying a good PC with decent specs and trying to run 720p at 60 frames per second money, or even simply saving for retirement, Phil decided to waste it all, hoarding. Phil's YouTube channel. Phil's YouTube channel is where all of his Let's Plays are uploaded. Rather than doing the traditional 30-minute episode once per day approach, Phil instead chooses quantity over quality and uploads more than 30 videos per day, all 10 minutes each. If it's a fighting game, the videos will only be 3 to 5 minutes long, depending on if the match goes to a third round or not. This is because Phil uploads individual matches as their own videos. As one would guess, there is no editing whatsoever. So when Phil dies or has to backtrack somewhere, the viewer has to suffer through every detail, no matter how irrelevant. The playthroughs are almost all blind as well, because in order to make money, he has to be the first one to upload a playthrough of a new release. Phil's procedure worked brilliantly when he first started, but for the wrong reasons. The reason Phil had gotten so popular is because he would upload so many videos per day that the YouTube search system would show only DSP videos whenever someone searched for gameplay footage of a game. This is how someone like him achieved 6-digit subscribers. Despite having over 160,000 subscribers at the time of this writing, Phil only averages 1,000 views per video. His view count used to be much higher, but it has declined ever since Phil's been exposed. Since Phil makes his money off of his view count, the less views he gets, the less money he makes. Before the existence of This Is How You Don't Plays and other detractor content, Phil's biggest enemy was copyright. Anyone could flag a video for copyright infringement, stating that the user is illegally using their content. If you had 3 copyright claims against you, your channel was shut down, no questions asked. Some games would be monitored closely upon release so that the game could flagged right away by the copyright holder. Phil's solution? Either make a parody title that search engines wouldn't find, such as Dicks with Guns for LA Noire, make an entirely new channel for that game so that the new channel gets shut down instead of his, or both. ReadyAds was eventually hacked by soccer match live streamers, and later terminated. It had gotten to the point where Phil had resorted to using blip.tv for his playthroughs, which worked at first until he got banned for excessive racism. When Splinter Cell: Conviction released, Phil did his usual day one release gameplay uploads, but his videos were all flagged by Ubisoft, forcing Phil's channel to shut down. After he and his fans complained about it, Ubisoft released a statement on their forums stating they had nothing to do with it. This ended up being true. YouTube tracked down the copyright claim to reveal the source of the claims as being a troll using the alias Steve Jones. This was the final straw for Phil. He went on to make 2 new channels, his current one and another dedicated to video logs. Before his vlog channel existed, Phil's original channel also contained plenty of non-gaming content. The most notable series he does is DSP Tries It. DSP Tries It is a series in which he reviews various fast food and other unhealthy stuff, like variations of Mountain Dew and energy drinks. Because the camera is often so close to him while he eats, it's the perfect series for if you want to hear a 32-year-old man chew loudly like a cow. This series has become a cash grab for Phil, as it allows him to get paid eating pizza and fried chicken while drinking Mountain Dew. The beginning of Phil's downfall. In 2012, Darkside Phil's views were in a downward spiral. Things took a turn for the worse when a former fan of his, Evil 2010, was blocked on Phil's channel for suggesting that Phil's obnoxious girlfriend, Panda Lee, was the cause of this. Later that year, this fan's ire was again provoked when Phil claimed that his fans had given him positive feedback on his /m/Metal Gear Solid 2 playthrough. In response, Evilage 2010 creating This Is How You Don't Play /m/Metal Gear Solid 2. His motivation was to show Phil the comments left by his own fans during his playthrough. After the creation of his /m/Metal Gear Solid 3 playthrough, Phil attempted to cash in on This Is How You Don't Play by doing a playthrough of /m/Metal Gear Solid 1. The entire playthrough was riddled with jokes about a Kojima World Order, and singing the theme of the professional wrestling team NWO. This marked the beginning of the Kojima World Order, a group of people dedicated to exposing Phil as the terrible human being he is and offering constructive criticism on how to improve while also explaining why nobody likes Phil. Considering Phil's ego, the latter is a lost cause. The This Is How You Don't Play series shows off what a typical Phil playthrough is like. Terrible gameplay, horrific commentary, racism, sexism, obnoxious burping, blaming the game for his failures, blaming the developers for his failures. If the game isn't ended prematurely with a rage quit, this behavior will be topped off with bald-faced hypocritical praise. At the end of the playthrough, if it is a new release, he will do a review video called The Hateful Truth, where he gives you maximum bullshit and minimum truth, by trying to look at it from the perspective of a common gamer, which Phil is clearly not. Sometimes, a game will be deducted points because he sucked. Despite this, Phil's scores will always be either 1 or 2 points off or the exact same score as other mainstream reviewers. Leanna Hengen, Panda Lee. Panda Lee was Phil's full-time girlfriend, who was introduced to him via an online gaming session. She was a die-hard fan of The Sims, and rather than help Phil, such as doing anything around the house, getting a job, or assisting Phil with the non-gaming stuff for his channel, she sat in her office, the Renton townhouse's second bedroom, and played The Sims all day long. One could be forgiven for assuming that she originally tried to use Phil to gain popularity for her own gaming channel, which did actually receive a machinima partnership. However, it was clear that she was just your standard gold digger who would leave Phil as soon as he can no longer support her. Until then, she remains Phil's. The first thing anyone noticed was the age gap between Panda Lee and Phil. When she was first introduced, people called into question the age of Panda Lee, and whether or not Phil was a pedophile. The couple had a strange father-daughter-like relationship. No affection common to a romantic couple could be seen in their appearances on camera, including personal vlog. The pair would choose to spend their time together at places that you would often see a parent taking their child, such as a zoo. Panda Lee would come to referred to as Phil's daughter by detractors after a troll stinging Barb in Destiny Online. Another thing you will immediately notice is how obnoxious she is. If you thought Phil's Let's Plays were bad, then his content that has Panda Lee in it is even worse. Panda Lee would never shut up, constantly whine, make annoying noises, and sometimes downright argue with Phil. Fans demanded her removal after she co-commentated in Phil's Assassin's Creed 3 playthrough. His response? "You're a fucking idiot. This is how you don't do co-op commentary" is just a small taste of what a typical playthrough featuring Panda Lee is like. Finally, you may notice when the two were together that Phil was completely pussy-whipped. It's not at all surprising considering how in many of Phil's playthroughs, he reacts to women like a 13-year-old seeing breasts for the first time. Respond to her blatant trolling in Phil's stream? Phil turns the chat to sub-only mode and says the viewers are in the wrong. No matter what Panda Lee says or does, Phil will always be there to defend her and cater to her every whim. Little did Phil know that as soon as his Let's Play money began to dwindle, forcing the young Panda Lee into the workforce, she would ditch Phil, who stubbornly remained in his own childish mindset. As of May 2017, Leanna has left the building. Phil the Twitch streamer, blind run. Phil's Twitch account was made so that Phil could stream his gameplay to his limited fanbase. While that sounds good that a Let's Player is streaming so that fans can see the gameplay live, the channel itself was basically a concentration camp. First and foremost, if you said anything other than praise for Phil, or holding his hand through a game's difficulties, you were banned. Period. Phil ran his channel like North Korea. Is Panda Lee on? Have fun sitting through her trolling with absolutely nothing you can do about it. Mention that you're running adblock? You're permanently banned. Phil honestly believes that anyone who uses adblock is stealing from him. Maybe you weren't interested in chatting or giving Phil instructions. That's fine. The stream is about the game, right? Phil's streams would start with a pre-stream that could go on for 30 minutes to an hour. It's basically him ranting about little things, whining about the detractors, and even going as far as blaming his own fans for his lack of views. It's also the perfect time for Phil to beg his viewers for money. What he does not understand is that this is where a lot of his lolcow content comes from. A great number of the Phil reveal videos you will see come from his pre-streams. After he finally gets off of his soapbox and plays the game, you're treated to a bitrate that is far too high by Twitch standards and for what American internet can handle. There are of course, constant breaks that Phil takes where you're treated to ads, assuming you're not a block-using thief. As expected, you could pay money to subscribe to Phil's channel, but there was absolutely no reason to ever do so. To put it bluntly, this was what you got for doing so, the ability to help Phil with something requiring his brain when Panda Lee comes in and causes Phil to put the chat in subscriber-only mode, emotes, priority on game box giveaways that have no game inside, and access to Phil's previous streams. Believe it or not, some people actually did this. One person in particular would pay to cover other people's subscriptions. As was previously mentioned, the high bitrate caused a Twitch admin to enter the chat one day, respectfully requesting Phil to lower the bitrate to the Twitch standards. Rather than comply, Phil complained that it would make his stream look bad. He even claimed later that the mod threatened to ban him from Twitch. Because of this inconsequential spat, Phil Twitch to stream on YouTube, in which he can stream in whatever quality he wants, and all views count towards his machinima contract. As of December 2016, Phil has come crawling back to Twitch. He now routinely holds fundraisers for himself, averaging about one a month as of 2020. Even with a drop in YouTube ad revenue, Twitch has allowed Phil to maintain an annual income well above $100,000. Phil Today. Phil Today is a sinking ship that one cannot take their eyes away from. Continuously making terrible let's plays and attempts at milking YouTube monetization for all it's worth has become more desperate as time has gone on. With blatant clickbaiting, obvious caps lock, important, must watch, and misleading and or false titles. Along with that, he continues to deny the reality of his future and any constructive criticism whatsoever. He also demands that people react positively to his videos, and to not listen to the haters and critics. He no longer has real-life friends. One friend, OJ, was recently married. Another friend, Howard, has been focusing on hosting Street Fighter tournaments. The only real one he had, John Rambo, who Phil relied on for a long time, has officially cut ties with Phil after Phil moved to the other end of the United States away from Rambo and practically left him alone at Connecticut to live in Washington to be with Panda Games. Everyone who has heard of DSP knows what the man is really like after watching a few exposed videos, or even "this is how you don't" plays of Phil ruining their favorite game. Any Google search for Phil Burnell will take you to one of the thousands of videos that show it. Also something to note, because of this and his long gap between when he was fired from his desk job and today, Phil will never be able to get a job that will support him ever again, or at least a job with a good paying salary. This is due to more corporations using social networks to look at online identities to make sure they do not have any criminal record on the internet or would bring a bad reputation to their company. Only Phil is mentioned in that statement because his daughter will have already ditched Phil for another man to leech off of, which suggestions point to v1.0.1.1. Once his Let's Play career is over, he will spend the rest of his life unable to escape debt from the move, and the fact he believed in his delusions more than reality. Being the laughingstock of any serious, casual, or even famous Let's Player, also does not help him. He's been talked about by many streamers and YouTubers that are more popular than him, such as Total Biscuit, Slow Beef, Retsuperi, Northernlian. One person, Das Bo Skit, even uses an accurate portrayal of Phil as a main character in his own Machinima series, YouTube Avenue. Phil has been beyond redemption for years now. There is no hope for him at the end of the road, only the consequences of not listening to criticism, putting in effort, or trying to improve. Updated in 2020. Despite making low six figures of income since about 2011, Phil filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in January 2020 with a whopping $131,000 of credit card debt. He also married, in April 2019, another fangirl by the name of Catherine St. Jean. After having bemoaned a lack of money to adopt a pet for several months, Phil revealed in summer of 2019 that he and Kat had in fact adopted a cat sometime around December 2018. He charged $2,000 to reveal this information. Most recently, he has been charging $100 to put on a vest every stream. Because he is funded by literal tards, he has reached at least this goal for 50 straight streams, including receiving $1,000 $1,200 on his birthday.